Today is the Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Do we still remember his story?
What were his ideals and what happened to them in the last 5 decades?
What is the racism that we face today? And is it the same as the racism of Dr. King's time? Welcome to Wei and Cathy Show. I'm your host, Wei Fang.
And I'm Cathy Zhang.
Yeah, actually, I'm quite looking forward to today's discussion with you. And for those of you there, please, thank you for coming. Please click like and the subscription, make sure you're subscribed.
Right.
And today we really, as two Chinese American, right, we were not born here, but today is the Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And we feel quite, strong or special about it. So we want to share with you our thought. All right. So first, I would like to go back in time and to review a little bit of Martin Luther King Jr. And what I found out is may not be something that everyone already know. So actually, I just realized that his name was not Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh.
Yeah. His real name shall be Michael King Jr. Mm-hmm. It really came from his father, okay? His father's name is Michael King Sr., okay? And he was a Baptist minister. Back in the 1930s, his father, Michael King Sr., was born in Atlanta, all right? And he was so he basically fell in love with a woman, and her name is Alberta. Alberta is the daughter of the priest of that church. The church is called Ebenezer Baptist Church. And the priest's name is A.D. Williams. All right, so the young Michael King Sr. fell in love with his daughter, Alberta. But, okay, the priest, the reverend, Williams said, you have to become a priest in order to marry my daughter.
Wow.
Okay, so Michael King was quite behaving. Okay, he actually went to the Morehouse School of Religion, and he received the formal religious education, and then finally he became the associate priest of that same church. The church is in Atlanta. It is in the northeast of the city. Okay, and then he was able to marry the daughter, Alberta, and become a couple. And finally, they gave birth to 3 children. The first one is a daughter. The second one is the renowned Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, anyway, in 1934, because it's a Baptist church, right? And the Baptist church have this a World Joint Conference in Germany. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he went to Baptist. Basically, that's a denomination of part of the Protestant. And Protestant, was founded in, remember, Martin Luther back in the 17th centuries in Germany. So basically, it's a pilgrim type of trip. Mm-hmm. So Michael King went over there and see the place where Martin Luther was born and how he grew and what he went through, how he started this reform, religious reform against Catholic at that time. So he was really moved by the story that he heard. I said, wow, he felt that this is quite a deed. He came back, he changed his name. Michael King Sr. become Martin Luther King Sr. That's how the name came about. And then, of course, he passed this name to his son, his eldest son, who is now Martin Luther King Jr., as we all familiar with the name, right? Okay, and then the young son went to religious school, got trained and followed his father's steps. And Martin Luther King Jr. actually said, my father never told me that he become a priest. But he said, my father is an honorable model for me. Okay, I said, it's not hard to follow his step and become priest. Well, he was only in his 20s. Okay, now we're talking about the Montgomery, Alabama, right? At that time, there was this Montgomery bus matter. Initially, it was a 14-year girl, and her name is Claudette Colvin. And this is a black schoolgirl in Montgomery, and she refused to give up her bus seat to a white man in violation of the Jim Crow law at that time. So basically, at that time in the bus, the front side is for white people, and after that is the seats for black people. Okay, but if the white section is filled up, and the white people needs to move into the seats for the black people needs to stand up and yield their seats. All right, so anyway, so that girl was violated the law and was arrested. And then so they were thinking about, the black community was thinking about, we need to do something about that. All right, they didn't really, do anything until a few months later, a second matter happened. This is everything that all things that we know today. Rosa Parks, she did the same thing. She's a 42-year-old seamstress, okay? And she sat in the front row of the black section, but then white people, they got filled up, they need to take those seats. So 3 of her fellows, they travel together, okay? They rode together, and then they yield the seats, and Rosa Parks stayed. So the driver called the police and arrested her, and then that's the starting of this Montgomery bus boycott. So the young Martin Luther King Jr. feel that we need to do something. No other leader was available or want to do this or dare to do this. Anyway, so he became the leader of this protest. That was the famous Montgomery bus boycott. So what happened is this, about the 30,000 black people in that city kind of taking the bus as the daily commute vehicle, right? And they refused to take it. About 200 black drivers, they drove their sedan back and forth, or the bike, tried to shuttle people to and from work. So they persisted for 385 days. Okay. In the meantime, yeah, it's quite more than a year. In the meantime, Rosa Parks, just sued the government, sued the mayor actually in the state court, which pretty much went nowhere. Okay, so they moved the case into the federal court, which is a district court. So a panel of 3 judges heard their case. Actually, finally, they ruled for Rosa Parks because they think that's the equal right. Violate the equal right clause in the Constitution, as we all understand, right? So the slavery and the segregation and those things always has been controversial back in the 1776, and also during the Constitutional Conference. It's only because of this, the Founding Fathers could not just do away with the slavery without pushing away the southern states. So they have to enter this compromise, saying that we're going to shelve this and deal with the slavery after 20 years. Ended up, it's 8 decades later, with the Civil War, resolved the slavery issue. But the segregation was still in place, and the discrimination still in place, and then it came to the time of the Martin Luther King. So anyway, so the judge ruled for Rosa Parks, and the defendant appealed to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court issued this final ruling and declared the local law is unconstitutional. So because of that matter, Martin Luther King becomes very famous, very well-known nationally, right? And then on the next year, as we all know, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Montgomery bus boycott, that was the 1963. 1 year later, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Okay, the country really changed fundamentally. And then Martin Luther King became the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. All right, so he pushed through what he believed in, advanced the civil rights through the nonviolence and the civil disobedience. He was mainly inspired by his Christian beliefs and the nonviolent activism of the Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. And Martin Luther King organized the famous 1964 March on Washington, where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And in that very march, 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. That was the largest ever in Washington, D.C. history by then, at that time. So, the crowd, as you can see, filled from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial onto the National Mall and around the reflection pool. And I Have a Dream is a 17-minute speech, And so I just want to read a few here. Just be a little patient with me because many of you think that I already know that. You don't need to do that. But it has to do with today's program. Okay, what do I want to say? Okay, so he said, I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Okay, and he said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He said, I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with his vicious racist, with his governor having his lips dripping with the word of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with the little white boy and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. Okay, that's what we know, right? It's only, of course, just accept. But let's just recall today. Did that happen? Did I realize? Did he have his dream? So as of today, let's just enumerate a few cases. Okay, Condoleezza Rice, a black woman become the Secretary of the State for George W. Bush, and Colin Powell become the first Defense Secretary and of Bush, President Bush. Obama become the first black president. And Ben Carson become the Urban Development Secretary of President Trump, and Kamala Harris become the first Vice President, and Lloyd Austin become the second black Secretary of the Defense. So across the horizon, we see black people rise to prominence, and they are all over the place. And also, as far as Martin Luther King is concerned, in the same year of the Civil Rights Act passing, he won the Nobel Prize for combating racial equality and through nonviolence resistance. And in 1977, the country gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and 6 years later, he earned the Congressional Gold Medal, right? And his name is all over the place. The King County where Seattle is, in the state of Washington, was named after him. And the President Ronald Reagan, okay, just declared today is the Martin Luther King federal holiday. Okay, so basically, Cathy, so what do you think? Do you see that if we go back to the original, right, what I read, little black girl and a little white girl can sit down with the little, just black girls and boys sit down with the white girl and the white boys. Not just that, I think yellow, they're all just together. This has become a normal phenomenon of this country, right? And then, so largely, if you just read from the quote that I just read to you, in the I Have a Dream, it's already happened. Okay, of course, in this country, we all understand there's this affirmative action which try to compensate the black people so that they can have equal footing. And then time goes by. When it comes to 1996, in the state of California, this is just one thread I want to share with you. In 1996, California passed this California Proposition 209. It is a ban on the use of race, sex, color, ethnicity and national origin in recruitment, admissions, and retention programs at California's public university and colleges, including the 10 California universities, UC Berkeley, UC Los Angeles, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that was the first electoral test of affirmative action policies in North America. It passed 55% in favor to 45% opposed. So that became the California law.
Yeah, I think why we raise this is because actually the so-called fight against the racism thing in California, we really, if we look at the history of it in California, it can really tell us, how it kind of changed, right? And still going on. So the Proposition 209 in 1996 is actually, it's like adding a section to the existing California Constitution's Declaration of Rights to eliminate, saying that the state cannot discriminate against or grant preferential treatment on the basis of those traits, right? Race, sex, color, ethnicity, or the national origin.
Yeah, and then let me just try to insert here. To me, okay, I think the Proposition 209 is very, very important. It's a landmark piece of law because it's indeed bring the 1964 Civil Rights Act to another level. Okay, just hear me again. This is what is quote from the I Have a Dream. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That is Proposition 209. Don't you agree? And I think it's worth dissecting, right? Proposition 209 to understand the rationale behind it. So, Cathy, I think
right. So the Proposition 209 is not only actually for California because it attracted national attention even at that time. So what I want to share with you, at that time there was an important hearing by the Senate Judiciary Committee on the April 30th of 1996. So the committee held a testimony, heard a testimony from the then California Governor Pete Wilson and others, including the former UC regent, who is also the chairman of the California Civil Rights Initiative. His name is called Ward Connolly. All right, so this California Civil Rights Initiative is actually, that was later on became Proposition 209. So Pete Wilson, governor at that time, he was saying that he believes the current language of the California Constitution Declaration of Rights does not require like a race or color preferences, but it permits preferences. And so therefore he believes the law at that time permits reverse discrimination. So he said, we must be concerned about individual rights, but rather than guarantee the results but cannot, guarantee results for the favorite members of favorite groups, which he, meant by the African American and the Hispanic groups at the time. So I wanted to share with you some of the clips of the testimonial by Ward Connolly. He really is the civil rights champion, not only in California, but also around the nation. And Connolly said that, he shared how, like in California, especially at that time in San Diego, but later on it proves, all over the state, that the UC system will automatically give Hispanic and African American students 300 points in a 800-point system. Okay, so basically it raises their GPA from 2.9 to 3.2. And on the other hand, they are turning away lower income but higher achieving Asian students and the white students from UC Berkeley because they are afraid that Berkeley will become all Asian plus some whites. So he mentioned that the proponents of such policy argued that it's not only tolerable, but it's essential to achieve social justice.
The time has come for us to eliminate government programs and concepts which legitimize treating our citizens differently based on immutable traits. We're dividing ourselves along racial lines. We're becoming more separate, more conscious about our racial characteristics, and more insistent that the groups with which we are individually identified receive their proportional share of the public pie. Our demand for allegiance to our racial self-interest has become so overarching that a prosecutor who happens to be black cannot prosecute another black without being called a sellout. A regent who happens to be black cannot oppose racial preferences without being called an Uncle Tom and having the color of his wife's skin being called into question by a state senator. There are those who say that we must use race to get beyond race. I disagree. The use of race is not inoculating us from the virus of racial hostilities. It is becoming the cause of the infection, and we must cure the problem.
See, some of the language is familiar even today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really worth sharing what he's, testified about.
Mm-hmm.
And he argued that in order to, do that in California, it is to pass the California Civil Rights Initiative, which was Proposition 209.
If there's any lesson that we can learn from the rest of the world, it is the fact that America's experiment with democracy will fail if we divide our people into racial enclaves and allocate jobs and contracts and college admissions on that basis. Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The one absolutely certain way of bringing this nation to ruin, of preventing all possibility of its continuing as a nation at all, would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, an intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, or Italian Americans, each preserving its separate nationality. His concern applies in our time more than it even did in his."
And Ward Connolly just really warned people about, the lessons from the history, and he talked about what's the true fairness.
And we have a passion for fairness. When any one of us has a different standard that we have to meet, when any one of us has to meet a different standard, it's unfair. It's wrong. It tears at the fabric of what holds us together.
So that was back in 1996 when Wei and Cathy is still not in California, not in this country yet. But years later, we personally, actually in California, we experienced how the California legislature tried to repeal Proposition 209. And it really waked up a lot of, especially Asian Americans, including the Chinese Americans, about how, this discrimination, racism issue is about, right?
Yeah, at that time, I think Cathy and we interviewed Walt Colony, and he was a regent of the UC California. So basically, he told this story. He said, well, I was passing like the schoolyard or something. Okay, he see the black boys, African American boys, that were just playing basketball, while the Asian student was diligently staying in the library and reading things like that. And he feel that they put so much work in the time in the study. Why shouldn't they got good academic record and go to UC system? And while the black boys they like play football, they don't quite study. The white just lower the bar for them. So he's a black activist himself, and I really feel he's so fair and he's so, how to say, he's just the word that I want to say is fair.
Yeah, and
in his point of view.
Yeah, in our interview with him, he actually pointed out, the rhetoric, the narrative from by the those democratic liberal movement, how they tried to use some excuse for the reverse discrimination, basically. Let's hear.
Of UC administrators, everybody talks in code. They don't tell you honestly what they want or what they're going to do. They talk in code. And one administrator told me that Asians were too boring and that they wanted to increase the number of blacks and Latinos. Well, the university only has so much money. They only have so many seats available at Berkeley and UCLA. And I said, well, how are you going to do this? And they said, well, we want to have more diversity. I said, but answer my question. How are you going to do that? And you never get an answer from them. And the reason is that the only way you can do this is to take from one group to give it to another group. Remember now that before 209 passed, the percentage of Asians in the UC system was about 22%. After 209 passed, it went to roughly 40%. It's not rocket science to figure out that if you want to increase, quote, diversity, and you don't have any more seats available, you're going to have to take it from Asians, primarily Chinese, because that's the most dominant Asian group in that demographic.
Yeah, and he said, if this system can, really reward on the merit basis, why do you want to change it? Yeah, and so now then it goes to from 2014. At that time, SCA 5 finally it was actually defeated, right? It was shelved.
Did you explain what is SCA 5?
Oh yeah, so it's in one word, it's try to repeal Proposition 209, which I said.
It's called the Senate Constitution Amendment 5. Okay, and that piece of law was introduced in 2012, and meant to, abolish the Proposition 209. So basically, it's saying that too many Asian students in UC universities, and UC schools, and they shall be more allocated according to the number of the different ethnic groups. And this is the Senator Hernandez, his word. He said that has been a precipitous drop in the percentage of Latino, African American, and Native American students at California public universities, despite the fact that those same group have been steady increases in their percentage of the college eligible high school graduates. So basically the percentage needs to reflect the percentage of the high school graduate.
That's why they said, okay, UC Berkeley, you have, the Asian students increased from 22 to 40%.
Yeah.
In the Asian only have about, what's the population percentage? 5%?
6.4%.
Yeah, okay. So, and then they said it's not proportional. So they want to manually make the admission of different ethnic group students proportionally.
Yeah. So does that work? How about this? Let's take a look of the National Football League, right? NFL. NFL on the 2020 have 1,700 players. These are professional players who make a lot of money. 70% of them are Black Americans. Okay. And how many Asian players there? 0. All right. So if we were to apply the percentage of the population to NFL, 980 Black players shall be laid off. Well, we have to add 99 Asian players, even we cannot find them, those who can play that well.
Yeah, but then, like Professor Victor Hansen, I interviewed him before, but he said that then who would be willing to watch such football
and
competition more?
And NBA, National Black Basketball Team, 450 people, right? Professional players in the 30 teams, and 77% of them are Black. They play very well. And if we were to apply the racial quota, 288 of them shall be laid off. Okay? Well, we need to have at least seven Chinese American players. We got Ling Shu, how was his name?
German.
We got German Ling for a while, just one. So we need to find another 6 or 7 today. But no, okay, the founding father said more than 230 years ago, as long as there's liberty, there's inequality. Okay, because people were given the liberty, they're going to develop to the fullness of what they're best at. If we require Asian people to play basketball as well as Black people, we cannot do that. And if you want a Black American just to score as much on the math as Asian student, it's hard for them to do that either. So why we insist on this equality of the result? Like, somebody are fat, somebody are thin, right? Somebody are beautiful, somebody are not that beautiful. Can we insist on equality over there? No. The equality only stay with the rights to do something, not the result of the, whether you are able to, what kind of school you can get into. So that's really the thing has been changed. And the 209, as we see today, don't you see that has implemented, that's realized the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. And today, we move across that. We try to appeal 209. We are enter a very clear reverse discrimination age.
Yeah, so in California, the efforts of repealing Proposition 209 actually did not stop after the 2014 SCA 5 died. So in 2020, there was another effort to reviving such turnover of Proposition 209. So the voters of California, and especially the Asian Americans, they really were onto it. And civil rights champion Mr. Ward Connolly again joined the Asian Americans in their fight against this effort. So it's called the Proposition 16. And this time again, the voters in California spoke out. They passed Proposition 16, which basically, make it illegal for California to consider race in deciding who will be admitted to the state universities. So that's, just a couple of years ago. But in California overall, a lot of people, have to agree it was declining, right?
Yeah.
From all front. It's, for the history of California, it's the first time that the people who exit California more than people who come in. So Professor Victor Davis Hanson actually wrote a book years ago about the decline, the fall of California. He wrote a book in 2015, and I interviewed him back in 2017 about his book, why he thinks California declined and is falling. So he actually touched upon also this discrimination and the racism issue. So I just dig it out. He's at that time I only did the radio show in our Chinese radio, but some of the clips I will just want to share with you to share his insights of why such kind of emphasis on the racism made the decline and the fall of California. So he pointed out a very important concept difference between multicultural versus multiracial.
Their message was mostly not political or economic, but cultural and socially. They made the argument, we are multicultural, so if you come here illegally, we're going to have a sanctuary city for you. We want you to be helped by the government. We want you to be dependent on the government. We want you to vote Democratic. If somebody wants to close the border and return to legal immigration, they're racist, they're xenophobic, they're nativist. So we created a climate where people of all these different races and nationalities considered themselves victims, and they all had something in common, that a supposedly racist, white, Republican, conservative hierarchy for years was culpable, and they were going to get rid of it. And that's what they did, they thought. But they never understood the paradox. If California was so bad in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and such an inhospitable place, why in the world would they want to come here? Who built these beautiful roads and dams and reservoirs and the university system and the college system? So the Democratic liberal movement said, really bad people are in California, we got to get rid of them, and we've got to hyphenate our names, and we've got to respect everybody gets to speak their own language. When you get on the phone, you'll push a button for whatever language you want to be. If you go to court, you'll have an interpreter. All of that was very costly. So that was part of the message as well. It was not a multiracial message.
So what does Professor Hanson believes in the multiracial concept?
Multiracialism says we don't care how you look. You came to the United States or you came to California, you adopt a common language, common culture. And whatever your culture is, you can keep it at home. But when you come out in public, you're going to speak English and you're going to accept the history and traditions of the United States. And that unites people. So we don't have an Italian-American studies program now. We don't have a Japanese-American studies program at the university because people assimilate. But now we're telling new groups, retain your culture, retain your language. You're a victim. The majority culture owes you something. And that's against human nature. It's not logical. So we're also a divided, fractious society. And you can't really say that there's an evil white conservative majority that did this, because the Republicans are about only a third of the state, and so-called white people, if that even exists anymore, because people in my family and your every family are intermarried and mixed up. But if there were such a thing as a white person on the census, they're only 40% of the population, 38%, I think. So we're running out of oppressors. If everybody's a victim, they need an oppressor, but there's not enough oppressors to blame anymore. So we're reaching a social, cultural, economic impasse. Something's got to give.
Victor Hansen, as some people may know, he has been living on the farm in Central Valley of California that his ancestor has, started there since 1870. And he said he's the only one, still living there. All his other family members, they all sold the farm, part of the farm that belongs to them, and moved out of California due to all those reasons, right? So he shared his own experience.
I live in a town that's about 90% Hispanic, and probably 50% of it are people here illegally from Mexico. I really don't care what they look like. I just want them to speak English and to have the same values, traditions that we've always had. And when you bring in so many people so quickly under illegal auspices, and they don't have high school diplomas, they don't speak English, and some have records, then it's very hard to assimilate them. And then we don't even try sometimes. So we're in a paradox. And as again, I said that people blame the United States for everything and our ancestors. But if that were true, why would anybody want to leave their own country and come here? So everybody comes here from a different country and they're told the United States is racist, sexist, slave-owning, whatever. They never say that, well, I'm leaving a place that did that too. Only usually you had genocides and killed thousands of people and you couldn't speak freely, but they forget that. And then they come and they say, if we have a gripe, then we can be a victim. And the problem, again, is that we have so many different groups, there's no way to adjudicate it.
And so, because California, and actually right now the whole nation, right, really have a lot of immigrants. And so I asked Professor Hansen what he wanted to, communicate with the immigrants about America and what they are doing right now. So, but I think even not for immigrants, everybody would benefit from his suggestions.
I've traveled all over the world, and I can tell you that if I wanted to be a citizen of Mexico, I would never be accepted because I don't look Mexican. If I went to China and said, you know what, I want to be a Chinese citizen, Victor Hansen, they would say, okay, you can do it legally, but we're never going to consider you the equal of a Chinese person because you don't look Chinese. If I want to go into Uganda, people will say, you can be a citizen of Uganda, but we're never going to fully accept you. So the United States is the only country in the world, maybe some countries in Western Europe, where we say to people, your appearance and your background is incidental. It's not essential to who you are. You can be just as American. I mean, my family has been in the same house for 140 years. You said maybe your family are immigrants, but I don't feel like I have any greater claim on the United States than you do, or I don't feel it belongs to a particular group. I think it belongs to only people who share a belief in the Constitution and its history. So I think immigrants should get straight about that for all the faults of the United States, it's the only country in the world where anybody can be a full-fledged citizen and with equal due process under the law, regardless of how they look or regardless of their ethnic background. And if they don't nurture that idea and they don't treasure it and love that idea, then there's no reason that it has to continue.
And he talked about how to make this true melting pot work.
But the only thing that keeps it working is everybody has to assimilate, integrate, and intermarry in their public life. If they want to speak their own language at home or eat particular foods, great, it enriches the country. But there's certain things that are not multicultural, and that's the U.S. Constitution, the English language, common allegiance to the United States. Those are not negotiable things. But I think the problem we have is now everybody puts a hyphen in their name or an accent in their name, and they think, you know what, I want this special culture, but they're not being honest to themselves. They're saying, I want to be Brazilian in the United States, but I don't want to go back to Brazil, but I don't want to accept your culture, but I want something in between. And you say to that person, when you get a brain tumor, do you want somebody to operate on you who's skilled, or do you only want somebody from Brazil to operate on you? Or when you live next to a nuclear power plant, do you want only a Brazilian to operate the nuclear core, or do you want somebody who's qualified regardless what the culture they are? And of course, when I get on a plane, I don't say to myself, boy, I hope the pilot is in a particular immigrant group. I don't say that. I don't care what they look like. I just say, I just hope the pilot, whatever they look like, passed a test that was ethnically blind. Believe me, that's what I think. But somehow we don't do that. And eventually we're going to get to the point where pilots or nuclear plant operators or brain surgeons are going to be predicated on your particular ethnic group and not your mastery of your subject. And when that happens, as has already happened in certain groups, and we're not assimilating, then I'm worried about it. So yeah, my advice to all immigrants is come, enrich the United States, teach us about dance, fashion, clothing, language, great. But in the public sphere, honor the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, the traditions of the United States, the language, and then try to assimilate, intermarry, integrate. I think that's what makes the melting pot work.
Yeah, so that's, Hoover Institution's senior fellow, classist, Professor Victor Hansen.
Yeah. So basically, from the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to the later affirmative action, which is sort of some type of a reverse discrimination, and to 1996 in California, this is Proposition 209, which really making racial a non-issue, race a non-issue. Okay, and then to today, clear reverse discrimination against the white and against Asian, and and just pursue this so-called equality in the result. Okay, if that's the case, how about the dentist? How about the surgeons? How about the physicians? How about the generals? How about every board? How about every committee and every profession? We need to have certain type of equal representation by the ethnics. Is that the country that we need? How can that be possible? Okay, there are two black Secretary of the Defense as of now. So Asian with 20 million people, we shall demand one Secretary of the State will be Asian, whether he can do the job or not. And Hispanic American needs to demand for 3 to be equal. So we can quarrel over all this every day and without anything done, without any qualified candidate to an important position. It's insane, right? We're facing some insanity here. However, having said that, this is outrageous reverse discrimination did not happen, accidentally. It has a very, very deep reason because American communism has been working from underneath and fooling everybody, including those liberal peoples. Because we are in China, we understand how that works. For the communists to take power, they have to divide and conquer. They have to grow the distrust and the hatred and the division. In China, it was farmers. In this country, they are African American and the Native Americans. They think that's their troop, and they're soldiers. And they fell victim to those, this American communist who never even assumed the name of Communist Party anymore, but they are. So this is what the crisis that this country is going through. So Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream has been realized in the past few decades. Black boy and girls sit down with the white boys and girls and yellow boy and girls and sit down together, and we are judging people not by their color but by their character. Until now, we're judging them by their colors again. If you're black, you represent just righteousness. If you're white, you represent evil. Is that what we want this country to be? No, right? This is another version of racism. We have another round of racism that we have to defeat. Just like how Martin Luther King defeated the other version of the racism. So today is Martin Luther King Day. So we bring this topic to you and also the interview. I hope we can all think about that. We don't have many of you. Okay, thank you for being here. We only have 3,000 people here. Okay, but there are 300 million people in this country. However, truth is always powerful. It's the most powerful thing. Let's just, if you can, pass this show or pass the thought. You can do it tonight, you can do it the next month or next year. Just remember what is the truth. And we pass that around, one person at a time. I think we can defeat this version of the racism in the United States of America.
All right. Yeah. So actually, we have one of our friends here. It was their birthdays today. So happy birthday, Louis. Right?
Oh, happy birthday, Louis. It's great to have you. It's like how to say, friends over there, right?
Right. And yeah, thank you all for the notes and comments. We will, look into your suggestions and so to do our best to,
Yeah. Thank you. Take care. Yeah, please pass this program around, and so that it can, how to say, it can break through the shadow ban or other means. But it's great to have you with us. And okay.
All right. So good night.
Good night. Take care.
Bye bye.
Until next time. Bye bye.